Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm covering not Rivet Wars Eastern Front, but Rivet Wars Reloaded from Steamforged Games. I know this all might be a tad confusing. This says Rivet Wars Eastern Front, it says Cool Mini or Not, and I'm saying Steamforged Games and Reloaded, and that's because, well, this game is being reloaded. Steamforged Games is picking this game up, they are taking it over, they are that's not true, I was going to say completely redoing it. They are partially redoing it in some ways. We'll cover some of the changes and details and all that, and there will be a link down below to the Kickstarter, you can check that out. Everything you see here is very much prototype. This is a work in progress as they transition from the original Rivet Wars Eastern Front to Rivet Wars Reloaded and all the changes therein. To that end, this is neither a review, nor a preview, nor first impressions. It's a little bit of a mix of everything as I go through my experience with the game. I've played the original Rivet Wars extensively. I have all the Rivet Wars and everything. As I go through the changes they have, my general impressions, thoughts, feelings, because some of the new things that they'll be doing aren't quite here yet, which means it's going to be very hard for me to review the solo campaign, for example, because I can't play that yet. But I am very excited for it. So let's talk about all this. Starting off the bat with the fact that this is a skirmish game. Rivet Wars is a skirmish game, a light, accessible skirmish game, which you'll have your various factions on the board as you vie for, well, control, as you vie for the going up the victory point track over here, getting to 10 victory points first, although that's one of the ways you can win. This is where we're going to start diving into some of the changes the game has, but you can win through either the 10 victory points over here, or alternatively you can win by accomplishing 3 of these goals on the right, 3 of these mission cards that will unlock slowly as the game progresses, giving you specific goals that you can go for that give you a different way to achieve victory other than just the victory points. Victory points will generally be earned by holding control points on the board. You'll hold control points on the board as your units enter them and as they maintain control throughout the various rounds. The general idea is every single round, the various factions are going to generate points that they can use to spawn units. Points and rivets, because, well, units have points and rivet costs. So for example, if we just look over here, and we have a basic standard rifleman unit, the standard rifleman unit over here is going to cost you 1 point to go ahead and put into play, versus an additional unit, let's say if we go ahead with this M2 Wolverine, will cost you 3 points and 1 rivet. Every turn you're going to generate points that can be used that round, and every turn you're going to generate rivets that can be saved round to add units to the board. And so using this economy system to slowly put units down the board and to figure out what units will react and respond to the current situation at hand. And the current situation at hand is a key part of this game. Units have different strengths as far as what they're good at, which units respond to which units react in different ways. Different units are going to have different strengths against infantry, against light units, against light machines, against light heavy cavalry. There's going to be 4 different strengths of units, and each unit has their strength all listed on the board over here, all listed on their cards over here. So for example, you can see over here, we're going to have the rivet cost of a unit over here, we're going to have their, not the rivet cost, the general cost of a unit over here, we're going to have their movement and how far they can move, we have the strength of the unit, we have how many hit points the unit has, and then we have the grid of what that unit is good at. So we can see over here, these riflemen over here are particularly good at other strength 1 units, and they're terrible at all the rest of the units. Whereas if you find the basic standard unit of the enemies over here, if we can find them over here, their standard units, let me see if I can find them over here. Where's the standard unit over here? The Panzerfaust. The Panzerfaust over here, these ones are particularly good at level 2 military, and they're also good at level 3 and level 1, but they're not as good at level 1. And so every unit type has their own strengths and weaknesses as far as how they react to your opponent, which is going to be a constantly evolving game state as players put units on the board, forcing you to evaluate which units you want to respond with, forcing them to evaluate which units they want to respond with, backwards and forwards as you try to figure out the best tactical situation, the best tactical deployment as you deploy units onto the maps in order to take control of the various points, in order to accomplish these side missions over here, in order to slowly take down and take out your units. The general gameplay structure every single round is you're going to spend those units, spend those deployment points to spawn units, then all units on the board will attack, and then all units can move. So it's not move and attack, it's spawn, attack, move, spawn, attack, move, spawn, attack, move, back and forth, although there will be units that have different abilities that break that. There'll be units that give other units modifiers to the range. There'll be units that give you these rapid deployment over here, these rapid units that can go ahead and move before attacking at a cost to their movement. Every unit has their own abilities on them, abilities that are very handily printed on the back of the cards whenever they're relevant. You're going to have specific cards over here that give you specific abilities on them whenever they're relevant, which is a nice little accessibility upgrade over the original game, which we'll get into when we talk about all the changes currently being made. But that's basically Rivet Wars. The general idea, before we get into specifics and details, is you're trying to spawn your various units, trying to marshal units, spending the recruitment points you have on them, spending the rivets on them. You have some fun little facts, like for instance this unit over here, this is a rivet on a unit. You have these modified abilities where you can place units. The default unit will have their own default unit, it'll have its own little cap, but you can also modify units with certain types of upgrades and you know, various weapons or units that will go into units to upgrade and augment them in different ways, giving you a degree of customization around the troops on the board. And that's basically Rivet Wars. A few other details back and forth around other things, around, you know, targeting deployment within each square, around, you know, various bombs or things that'll have a degree of splattering across the board and how you manage all that. But the basic idea is it is a skirmish game in which you have a variety of unit types. More and more unit types, the more content you get for the game. The base game will have, you know, well, actually I don't know what the base game will have, but the base game here currently has all these cards over here. But you're going to have each of these cards and unit types for each of the factions. The more content you get, the more you'll have different variety to those factions, to the content you can spawn, to the add to the game. And then after that, it's all about getting that, putting it onto the board, putting it into the game state, and figuring out the best way to react and adjust to the enemies as you try to get your 10 points or your mission objectives. As far as changes to the game, before we dive into any sort of review or any further opinion, oh, and combat, by the way, combat generally involves rolling dice. So let's go ahead and just show you an example of that before we dive into this. But combat's going to have a specific combat grid where you're going to look at the unit, you're going to look to see what type of unit that enemy is fighting. So for example, if these rocket cycles over here, if this rocket cycle is fighting against this over here, and that over there, that little monowheel dragoon is a type 2 unit, and so the rocket cycle fires against a type 2 unit, which means they're going to go twice, they're going to roll 2 dice. And the way that works is you hit on 5s and 6s, and you have 2 shots, and each time it's a binary either hit or miss. So if we roll that over there, that was our first attempt, we did not get a hit. And if we do it again, we did not get a hit, you missed. In general, the way it works is each attempt to hit only results in a single hit, but you have that many attempts to go ahead and hit the enemy unit, and so you have the different units have their how many times you shoot, how many dice you roll each attempt, and you hit on 5s and 6s, and then this also tells you, various whether you're land or military or air and all those details as well. And that's basically what's happening in Rivet Wars. As far as changes to the gameplay, and this will not necessarily be an exhaustive degree of changes, but there's a few changes to cover. First of all, the change in the way the terrain hexes are. Instead of having standard 9-tile grids, they have a lot more variability to the actual hexes, different sizes in a way that the original game just had 9-tile grids, and this has a whole bunch of other varied shapes to give you more customization, more flexibility to the map shapes and types you can build. You're going to have a solo mode in the game, which they did not have before. You're going to have a solo mode along with campaign play that you can go through as well, giving you a lot more ways to interact with the game, which for me is one of the first things. When I found out that they were redoing Rivet Wars, one of the first things I asked is there going to be solo mode and is there going to be a campaign mode? To which the answer to both those was yes. And I'm very excited about that because we'll talk about it more in my opinion of the game and why I want that. There's also going to be a new faction added to the system. This game currently has 2 factions. There'll be a 3rd faction added to the game as well, so that will be another thing that'll be added. There's going to be these mission cards. The original game had these degree of secret cards you can have in your cards that when you achieve them, you earn points towards the victory track. And this game, rather than going with that because of the hidden nature of it and how they could just end up in a whole bunch of points, they're instead going with this mission card row, which will slowly unlock as the game progresses. Instead of giving you extra points, it gives both players the opportunity to earn these cards, and the first player to get 3 of those cards wins the game. And so you're fighting on 2 different fronts at the same time, trying to figure out which pathway towards victory will earn you the faster, speedier return. There's also going to be graphical design changes, both to the art, the components, the upgrades. You're seeing whole new interfaces on some of these cards over here. The miniatures to some small extent will be cleaned up or adjusted in the way they are. You're going to see small things like that as far as the extra, the gameplay changes. You're going to see small cleanups to the rules. You're going to see small changes to the order for targeting and the deviation guide. So a lot of small quality of life changes to the game. I think the bigger changes you're looking for are going to be the way you have the mission cards, the way you have a solo mode and campaign mode, the new factions, and the graphical design changes are going to be the bigger things you're seeing. There's probably a lot of other small little details I'm not getting to, but that's at a higher level what's changing within Rivet Wars Reloaded. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, and this category is a very different than my usual review because, well, this is, again, like I said already, this is a review in progress. I have the original Rivet Wars, and don't judge me for this, but, like, really, really, please don't judge me for this, but I have the original Rivet Wars. There's more than this. There is more than this, but this is currently what I have in terms of the original Rivet Wars, all in this giant bucket of just miniatures over here from everything mixed together. No, this is not actually everything. This is just a sampling of the original Rivet Wars that I actually have. The rest of it's upstairs, actually, in some of the boxes. We just have a lot of miniatures in a giant plastic bucket. I'll leave this on the table so you can see the fact that I do really like Rivet Wars, or maybe I really don't like Rivet Wars. You can judge that. But Rivet Wars is a game that I've had in my collection for a long time. It's a game that I've played with my daughter when I first got it. When she was probably 6 or 7 is when I first started playing this game with her, and it was one of her first real head-to-head games that I played with her, and we really dove into it. And as she grew up, we got more content for it, and we added more and more, and now we have the boxes and the bins and all the Rivet Wars content you can possibly want. No, really, like, this is all the Rivet Wars content you can possibly want. And so my opinion of this game is a mix because of the things that are coming into the game, things that I haven't had the opportunity to play, versus my general opinion of the game. So consider this review / first impression / excited about things to come, a combination of things all at once. But to begin with, in terms of Rivet Wars, the first baseline, this should be clear from what I just said about my daughter, is I like this as a simple, accessible system. This is a simple, accessible skirmish game that manages to give you enough tactical depth to it to be rewarding, enough options as you react to what your opponents are doing, enough options as you try to figure out how to pivot and adjust. You just spawned a bunch of, mono-wheel dragoons, so I'm going to go ahead and get a bunch of rocket cycles in play because that will be the best way to move slowly across the battlefield, taking you out. You have more infantry, you have more heavy military. You're going to have different options as far as where you're spawning, what you're spawning, how you're engaging with the system, where you're trying to push me back on those various objective points and things like that, as the players are trying to swing back and forth, trying to take advantage of the battlefield. And it gives you that simple, accessible system that is very rewarding to go through and yet not overly complicated, and I think that's its strongest suit. It is a game that gives you enough depth and enough strategy to give you agency and choice and responding and adjusting to what your opponents are doing, and yet it's simple enough to actually just understand. Once you give people the basics and you show them the cards, it is simple enough to get up and running in that. This is a great tactical entry point into skirmish games, giving you both flexibility and accessibility all at the same time. And it gives you fun miniatures with a lot of variety to the system, and the Rivet Wars, that plug-and-play Rivet system, is a lot of fun as well. This game gives you a million little units you can dive into, although again, this does depend on how much content you get. This can be one of the downsides here, which this is going to give you a core game, and I don't know exactly what's in Rivet Wars Reloaded yet, but this is going to give you a core game that is very fun and accessible, but also is going to have you wanting a lot more as well. So yes, you will have plenty of content in the core game. Yes, you will not be lacking for a good system, but there's even more content past that. Once you're willing to expand past the core game, there's even more out there that you can use to expand your system and to give you a ton of variety to that system. So it's visually appealing, it's simple to learn, it's accessible, it's variable, it does give you strategy and tactical depth, and I really like some of the changes they're making offhand as well, with the caveat that some of these changes I've been able to experience and play with, and others I have not yet, and I'm just excited about. I like the system of these campaign cards, these mission cards that you have in the game. The fact that you have these goals you can go for, and it's not just about victory points. I like that a lot because I like it when a game gives you multiple pivot points to go off of. That you have to sit there and think, okay, great, I'm going for those victory points, but maybe I see you're winning there, and so maybe I pivot and adjust my strategy, and you have to respond to me. I like it a lot when games are not purely focused on killing people, and this game, not only is it not focused on killing people, it gives you different pathways towards victory even once you're past that, and I like that change off the bat. I'm very excited for the solo campaign mode. One of the downsides of Rivet Wars, which we'll talk about soon, is the fact that it is a simple game, which means it has a limit to how accessible it is. But I also think that makes it perfect for the kind of game that I would play it either cooperatively or as a solo campaign to go through it, and I definitely am excited about the solo mode and the campaign progression system, giving me the flexibility and the accessibility, but also I find games that could be lighter sometimes and therefore not as engaging as a heavier experience, sometimes as a cooperative or solo mode can be exactly the level of lightness that I want as I casually stroll through the system, playing one game at a time, going through it, engaging, figuring out how to win and how to go over and take one over the enemy there. And so I'm very excited about the solo and campaign mode, but although noted that I have not played it yet. As far as what I don't like, as a starting baseline, it still can be irritating to figure out who gets dice for who. Now I say still because this was a problem in the original Rivet Wars, and I think that they've cleaned up very nicely and Reloaded in the graphical design, but it's still something that is still not the cleanest system ever. In general, you're going to be looking at a card, and you're going to say, hey, this is a level 2 unit, and this level 2 unit fires best at level 3 units over here, and you're going to be constantly going back and forth, looking and reminding yourself what units they're fighting against, and how many dice you're rolling, and in what system. There's a lot of factors going in, as you basically cross-reference a little grid of what you're rolling against who and how many times. And yes, if you just have the core set, you will learn those things pretty simply. If you just have the core set with 8, 9, 10 units on both sides, you will learn that adjustments pretty quickly. You'll learn the flexibility flexibility. You learn the way each unit responds to each unit pretty quickly, but the more units you get, which I think will add to your experience in the game, the more it'll also become overwhelming to remember what shoots back against what. And this is something that I'd love to see even further made clear in some way, shape, or form as the game progresses. I think what they've done with the graphic design is already a significantly better than the original graphic design for the game, but at the same time, I still think there is room for making it even more clear, even more obvious who or what you're fighting against at any given point. Additionally, this game can be simple compared to other skirmish games. I do think this is a lightweight entry point to skirmish games, which means if you're looking for something on a little on the heavier side, I don't think this game is for you. You might enjoy the solo campaign mode, or the campaign mode in general. You might enjoy that aspect, but I think this is a lighter, more accessible skirmish game, and unless you're okay with that, you might find that this is not the game system you're looking for. Sure, it's got great miniatures, it's got a ton of variability, but it doesn't necessarily have the depth that you're looking for from some skirmish games, and so you have to know what this game is. And then this is a game with a lot of dice rolling. Many skirmish games in particular, do have a lot of dice rolling. This one definitely has a lot of it though, as you rapidly take shots back and forth at each other, trying to figure out who can land the most hits. And you'll have players who roll better and roll less. You have to know what Rivet Wars is and what it isn't. It is a great entryway, accessible skirmish game, but it is a little bit on the lighter side at the same time. Which brings me to final thoughts on Rivet Wars. Final thoughts that aren't really final thoughts because of the weird middle point that this game is in. This is a game that I have a lot of and have clearly decided that I am happy to own plenty of Rivet Wars content for. This is a game that I've genuinely enjoyed and thought was a great game, but it's also a game I don't table quite as often because for me it primarily is and was an entryway skirmish game. One that I was happy to play with my kids, one that I've been happy to play when I'm looking for something a little bit lighter, but one that also is not a game that makes a regular appearance at my table. I'm excited for the changes that Steamforged Games is making around the game. I'm excited for the extra faction. I'm excited for the changes to campaign play. I'm excited to the missions they have. I'm excited for the different in the way these missions come out. I like that change a lot. But mostly, I would say on a personal note, I'm mostly excited for the solo and campaign modes. I think that'll be a significantly more interesting way to continue to dive into the system for when I'm done playing it with my kids and I'm looking for something that my kids or I'm looking for something lighter at game night or whatnot. But it'll be a fun way to dive into the game, and I'm very excited to dive into the game in those modes as well. I think Rivet Wars is a good starting point for a skirmish game, and I think the changes that Steamforged Games is making to it will make this a game that has even more gameplay on your table than it already does, and it's already got a lot of content for it. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Battlelore. Battlelore from Fantasy Flight Games is a game that is another, gateway skirmish game that I think is probably a step up from Rivet Wars, but gives you a lot of customization, a lot of flexibility. Also out of print like the original Rivet Wars, but a lot of content for that if you can track it all down, giving you another different skirmish game for your table. And then Super Fantasy Brawl from Mythic Games. That's another one as well that I find to be less dice driven, more card driven, but another gateway plus skirmish game that gives you a lot of fun flexibility, and that one is still in print from these. Overall, I'm excited for this. I'm excited for the changes they're making. This is neither a review, this is neither first impressions. I like Rivet Wars. Rivet Wars I'd probably give a 3.5 out of 5 on its own. The changes Steamforged Games is making to it may bump that up, but I can't say so certainly because I've only seen half those changes so far. I like the game, I can tell you that much. I like the game. I think it's a solid, accessible skirmish game that is worth checking out. Understand that it is on the lighter side, but assuming that doesn't scare you off, this is a really good lighter side, accessible entry point skirmish game. I've used the words like accessible, entry point way too many times in this video, but you get my drift. It's a good game, a good system, and I'm happy to see Steamforged Games doing more with it. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.